I'm looking at an ocean racer. On a grey spring day, Zulu is slipping into the water for yet another season, to add to her existing total of thousands of hours of racing. And not just racing around the buoys on a sunny day, but days and nights out of sight of land, across oceans. And even before Zulu ever took the water, she represented 1,000 hours on the drawing board, and during about a year of building, she used up 12,000 skilled hours of men working on Iroko and mahogany, spruce, teak, Oregon pine, brass, gunmetal, lead, and stainless steel. But these are all dead, land-based facts about Zulu. When she's in the water, she's a live vessel on which, for a precious total of days every season, a group of men find themselves a man's life a long way from the office. We're going to sail with her now in the Fastnet Race, starting from the Isle of Wight, past the Scilly Islands, round the Fastnet Rock in the Atlantic swell off the coast of Ireland, and back to Plymouth. It all starts at the end of Cowes Week, when the people who race closer ashore have ended their season with revelry and fireworks.
The Royal Yacht Squadron cannon signals the start of 5 hard days and nights at sea. In the cockpit of a yacht called Zulu, 8 men unleash themselves into practiced activity as they sail through an invisible starting line across the Solent. It's gone 6, and the evening is velvet soft, the wind flighty, and the zigzag tacking into it is an intricate pattern of purpose. Class 1 is first away, and 35 skippers from 10 nations sort out a course in a medley of languages. Here is number 1034, Zulu, and our cameraman is aboard her. Towards the Cowes shore, the water is deep, and skippers are having to cast a wary eye as each tacks his yacht to grab a few more yards to windward. Behind Zulu, the smaller Class 2 competitors await their start. Some of them are fleet enough to catch the bigger boys, but Zulu is half a mile ahead, and Plymouth is still 605 to go. Right now, covering cameras pick up the leader, Gitana 4. Gitana 4 is the biggest entry in the Fastnet. That fast quadrilateral sail instead of the normal triangular foresail is helping her already to leap ahead of the opposition. She's yawl-rigged, that's 2-masted with a little mizzenmast aft. The crew there are all settling down, sorting out their sheets, having a look at other competitors who are able to tack in closer to shore. Baron de Rothschild, who's sailing Gitana under French colors, is making the most of this light weather. Zulu is a veteran of ocean racing. She may not be the fastest boat in a race, but she has time on handicap and a crew who are as determined as any. A medical student, David Revel, is cook tonight.
I started ocean racing, or ocean sailing anyway, on the Rona scheme, which is a scheme started by Lord Amery for character training, youth instruction. Started through the Sea Scouts as a volunteer mate on board this scheme. Built my way up from there. I think sailing is a challenge. Quite often this is when it's most enjoyable, is when it is a challenge. It's nice to sort of feel at terms with the elements, knowing that you are depending on the wind and the sea. I feel that I am, in a way, cut out for medicine. It is my main life. If I had to give up sailing or medicine, it would have to be sailing. Not that I'd like to give up either. If I could sort of finally get into a practice where I was sailing at the same time, all well and good, but I can see I'll probably have to drop out of it later on. I now spend quite a lot of time going to concerts. I go about once a week to the Festival Hall or the Albert Hall. This interest started about 3 or 4 years ago when I was lent a record of Gustav Holst's Planet Suite, and it just seemed to click. And my favourite composers are now more the modern ones, or this century anyway. I'm very keen on Stravinsky, Walton's another composer I'm very fond of. prevail, yes. Trying to put music together in the sailing, it's very difficult. I think there is an association that I have for the two, but I certainly can't pinpoint it down.
Saturday night off Portland Bill. Aboard Zulu, a student, and also an ex-ship's captain, Paul Collins.
Sailing is a very fine recreation. It's a complete break and a change. One is far away from telephones and things which disrupt one's most awkward moments.
Hello, Collins here. So Glenorchy is due Brixham at 1600 on Sunday the 8th. She should make the midday tide Monday and will start working cargo on Tuesday morning. I'm just going down to Glenroy now. She's just in from the Far East.
Well, as a marine superintendent, one really takes over the actual organization of the ship when she comes into a home port. Then one looks after and coordinates various repairs. Well, as master of a large vessel, you are virtually monarch of all you survey when you're on the ship. It's so very different when you're in a small yacht that you cannot really compare them at all. Sailing is a very different kettle of fish altogether. Possibly the difference between well, going along in a bus and doing a point-to-point gallop on a horse.
Sunday, 7 a.m. Off Start Point on the Devon coast, the cameras catch Zulu as her crew prepare to change a headsail. Zulu's had a good night's sailing, but the wind seems to have virtually disappeared this morning. Skipper Brian Stewart has called for a lighter wind Genoa, which means a bigger sail to catch every whisper of wind that's about. Sail handling is important in an ocean race because time lost can mean a couple of places in the final result. These young crew members on Zulu are pretty well trained from past ocean racing experience. Brian Stewart doesn't want to find himself stuck off Devon for too long, particularly as the tide is setting against him, and with this wind he's more likely to find himself sailing backwards. Changing sails is quite a fiddly business. Getting hanks off the stays, taking in the old sail, and then quickly getting the halyards, the sheets, and so on onto the new Genoa with all speed. They don't want it on upside down. The activity on deck will have woken the crew down below. A yacht can be a noisy place with a rattle of winches and crew thumping about in their sea boots. Talking of footwear, Skipper Brian Stewart elects to be fashionable in a large pair of gumboots. Stewart's done well to drive Zulu through the night to this point. There are other members of the fleet dotted about the horizon, some of them perhaps even enjoying a little better luck with a fickle wind. In seaman's language, it's a wind full of holes. A racing yacht carries several suits of sails for different weather conditions. Some yachts seem to make the most out of this kind of weather, moving like ghosts while their competitors stand almost still. Brian Stewart's a very experienced ocean racing man, and he's been sailing Zulu for 5 seasons. He's taken her through some real rough stuff already this season, and our cameraman, who's on board for this Fastnet, had to try his sea legs out on an earlier race to see if he could take it. As Stewart put it, you can't afford to have a seasick passenger on board. And as the cameraman is having to work his passage in this race by doubling up as ship's cook, there's even more reason why he needs to have a good stomach. Even in a big Class 1 ocean racer like Zulu, life can be pretty hectic when the wind gets up. But right now, our cameraman cum cook is probably dishing up scrambled eggs and bacon. And in 150 other Fastnet yachts dotted about the channel, the same sort of scene is probably taking place. Stewart is one of the most experienced of ocean racing skippers. He uses every new toy of navigation, but still finds a sextant check on a distant mark invaluable. Navigation is an exact science, and old hands like Collins and Stewart know its value in helping to show a clean pair of heels to competitors, even though they're helming newer and faster boats. Stewart is one of those quiet, enthusiastic Englishmen who take to sailing for inborn reasons which may seem prosaic in print, but are vividly displayed in their fine seamanship in races like this.
I'm an underwriter at Lloyd's. I drive up to the city every day by car. On Fridays it's a little bit different though, because I put my sailing clothes in the car then, and Friday afternoon I get a little bit impatient and eventually get away, setting off by car to the coast. It seems to be a tradition at Lloyd's that a lot of people go sailing, either ocean racing or just cruising. This stems from their probable wish to get away from city life and telephones. Lloyd's is right in the centre of the city. Sometimes I'm lucky enough to find somewhere to park. Once inside Lloyd's, there's a very large number of people, anything up to 3,000 or 4,000 in the underwriting room all at the same time. It appears to an outsider to be absolute chaos, with a lot of people running around with no purpose at all. But in practice, they are all busily occupied in something or other, in spite of the apparent confusion. If I want to find one of my fellow yachtsmen, such as the person skippering Lutine, to find out how he's getting on over the weekend, I would call him with one of the waiters, there being a special system at Lloyd's to be able to find people in this very large underwriting room. All forms of insurances, or nearly all forms, are transacted at Lloyd's, everything from insuring large ships, aircraft, even yachts taking part in Fastnet races. Also, some of their crews are insured in case they should suffer some form of accident. Yachting is an expensive sport, and as with almost everything, the cost is perpetually rising. I think that the fact that the price of yachting is rising, well, that applies to everything else, and there's no reason for giving up yachting because of it. One would merely find oneself doing something else which was getting more expensive. Very often when ocean racing, one doesn't see any other yachts at all. When one does sight one, well, there's considerable excitement. First to identify them, and then to work out whether on handicap one's beating them or not. This sailing out of sights of other yachts all the time gives rise to one of the major problems of ocean racing, in that one's crew has got to be kept really on their toes and getting the boat going at the maximum speed without the encouragement of another yacht to try and overtake nearby. And it is the success in doing this or otherwise which produces the success or otherwise in races. On the longer ocean races, one is encouraged to call up the signal stations and report one's rounding the various marks. The Lizard and the Fastnet Rock are the two main ones on the Fastnet Race, and many of the yachts do get a message through so that their whereabouts can be reported not only to the organisers of the race but to their families who are a little anxious as to where they've got to.
Coastal Command keep an eye on the fleet, now spread out from Land's End and the Scillies to the lonely Fastnet Rock itself. The Scillies ferry gets a grandstand view. The big yawl Gitana 4 has already romped round the rock, but Zulu and the rest of the pack are hard in her wake. The big spinnakers have been pulling them along at a zestful rate of knots. There's a long haul to that southernmost tip of Ireland ahead, and Zulu's on course.
Navigation is a major part of ocean racing. One tends to use all the aids that are available to one. A few of them, such as radar and the Decker navigation system, are banned because they would make it too easy. They're also very expensive. But the radio direction finder and also the console stations are very much used, and all of them tend to assist in establishing definitely where one is.
Stewart is a fine seaman. Paul Collins too. And this is how he holidays.
Family ties have got to be carefully sorted out. It's not obviously a good thing to go away sailing all the time and just leave your family in the lurch. But I think these things can be fitted in from time to time.
While Paul Collins is at sea, Mrs. Collins returns to her childhood home, the Channel Islands.
I've known my husband since I was a child. So he was a friend of my brother's. We used to go out family picnics together, and the boys would take yachts. I was a small, unpleasant sister who used to flounder around amongst and sink them. In fact, I've been gunning for his yachts ever since I first knew him. When I married him, he was deep sea, and I mean, I was prepared for him to take long voyages. But I did know that he was coming ashore ultimately. That wasn't going to be my ultimate destiny, a sort of sailing widow. So now it's our holidays to ruin by sea, not our working life. Invariably, the Fastnet Race collects some sort of deep depression coming across the Atlantic, and I pick up the paper, and there I read the yachts were last seen disappearing under grey skies and lowering clouds.
Very much the crew are looking after the basic essentials of life, of eating, sleeping, and keeping the boat going. There's not very much time left or inclination, I think, for any washing and shaving, and there's always the excuse that there's only a very limited amount of fresh water on board, and therefore washing and shaving isn't altogether encouraged. When one has a full crew, as one does for a long race, there are 8 people on board. 6 of them are regularly keeping watches in 2 groups of 3, and these 2 groups don't see very much of each other, because one lot's sleeping while the other lot's up on deck. They may pass in the hatchway or meet just while eating a meal, but life becomes keyed very much to this watch-keeping system of 4 hours on and 4 hours off, with certain variations to that. The first time I ever rounded the Fastnet Rock, which was on the 1953 Fastnet Race, I think there was a certain sense of awe at seeing this almost pillar of ocean racing, if I can call it that. The longest leg on the Fastnet Race is that from Land's End to the Fastnet Rock. And I think nearly all the crew have a sense of setting off into the blue when they vanish out of sight of land on this long leg. In this particular year, there was a following wind, which is very unusual, and as a result the yachts were able to head straight for the rock, and considerable care was exercised with the navigation to make sure that it was found first shot. As one's approaching the Fastnet Rock, the decision has to be made as to which way to go round it, because this race is unusual in allowing one to go round the furthest mark in either direction. And turning through such a sharp corner, almost 180 degrees, a lot of sail changes have to be done in many cases, and the yacht has to be made ready for going round this sharp turn. Ocean racing began in England with a challenge between some very wealthy yacht owners, and in those days yachts meant enormous vessels, and they decided to have a race for a wager, and they chose the Fastnet Rock as the turning point on this race. And ever since then, this Fastnet Rock has become almost symbolic of ocean racing. In the Royal Ocean Racing Club's premises in London, there is a painting halfway up the staircase showing the Fastnet Rock with one yacht sailing past, the remains of another one, or a lot of pieces of timber floating about, and this rather helps to add to this reputation of the rock. In recent years, there's been a lot of new yachts built, many of them especially for taking part in the Admiral's Cup Challenge, and many of them are crewed by a regular crew who spend their spare weekends training, practicing sail changes. In recent years, ocean racing has been becoming keener and keener. This has arisen because of the challenges from abroad. In this year's Fastnet Race, there were teams coming from many different countries, amongst them Holland, France, America, Australia, Italy, Sweden, and so on. And this international challenge has, of necessity, caused some people to defend their country's reputation and take it more and more seriously. I think it's hard to know why all the various people go ocean racing, or just sailing for that matter. After rounding the Fastnet Rock, there's a certain sense that one's on the way home. I think in the same way that a horse gets that feeling on being turned for home and begins going a little bit faster. It's partly brought about by the fact that there's nearly always a following wind to take one home from the Fastnet to Plymouth, though in this particular year there was a headwind, almost an unheard of thing.
Another crew member, Vernon Sainsbury, is the oldest ocean racing hand aboard.
It's an extraordinary game, this ocean racing. It gets hold of you. It's almost a drug. Under bad conditions, you begin to wonder why you're there. And as soon as you get back to port, all the uncomfortable, beastly side of ocean racing seems to disappear, and you only remember the highlights.
Sainsbury is a yacht architect. That's designing the layout and where the gear and fittings go. His office in Lymington is near enough to the harbour for him to see his designs afloat and a building. He used to make his living farming, but sailing changed from a hobby to a profession.
I don't think you can make your living either designing or selling or doing anything else with yachts unless you are passionately interested in sailing yachts.
Ocean racing can be quite exhausting for the crew. Under good conditions, they get more sleep than they need. This doesn't enable them to sleep all that much, but nevertheless, if it gets very rough, well then, sleeping is hard, it takes that much longer eating a meal, it takes longer getting into oilskins. It's also that much harder to sleep because of all the noise going on. Anybody talking in the cockpit sounds as if they've got their head down into the hatch to the people who are trying to sleep down below. And therefore, people tend to be tired most of the race. It's because of this that they can sleep. It's rather self-adjusting. It's very hard to guess how much it does cost to run a boat. Some people will probably spend 500 or 600 pounds in a year. Others spend anything 5,000 or 10,000 pounds in a year. I like to limit the amount of money I spend on racing. It precludes one having a new boat or new sails every year, but one can still get a lot of pleasure out of it. Almost everybody's frightened the first time they're on a yacht which runs into rough weather. But once one's seen that the yacht can stand up to it, well then a considerable amount of confidence is given by that experience, and the next time one doesn't have any fears, but a certain amount of exhilaration in seeing the yacht coping with this difficult condition.
Today, John Coombs wears oilskins. Other times, he's a commercial traveller.
Well, this is my second season sailing on Zulu, my second season of ocean racing. I usually have to confine myself to weekend races because time off midweek is rather difficult to get, and anyway I lose money over it. Well, I'm a rep for a company that markets rubber car mats, bathroom mats. We sell hot water bottles and baby's teats to chemists. On the road most of the day.
Coombs has snatched a week's holiday to be on the Fastnet. He enjoys the contrast to his work.
Good morning, Mr. Simpson.
Ah, good morning.
How are you this morning?
I'm pleased to see you.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
Fine. What have I been up to?
Sold out of that match, absolutely. I've got one in
really?
store. But a real good order for you here.
Go on,
Very
very good.
fine.
That's all right. The salesman's life is it's full all the time. There's always something to do. You're always chasing somebody for an order or servicing an account somehow. At sea, things are different. You're dependent upon the elements. That's about as fast as you can go and as fast as you work. If there's no wind, well, you can't go anywhere. And if there is wind, well, you go fast. Time and life has a different sort of meaning.
Baron de Rothschild's big yawl Gitana 4 arrives home first at Plymouth. A new record for the Fastnet is established of 3 days, 9 hours and 40 minutes as this, the biggest yacht in the race, slipped into dock. At this stage, there's an outside chance that Gitana could win, but this is a race where even the smallest has a chance on handicap. Meanwhile, the rest of the fleet are still battling their way around the Fastnet. And in the morning, there's a dockside press conference for the Baron with a Westward Television interviewer.
Baron, welcome to Plymouth, and congratulations on a record time.
Thank you very much.
What kind of a trip has it been, Baron?
Very comfortable.
You had no rough weather?
We had no rough weather except a little bit of rough weather around the Fastnet, but nothing to be worth talking about. It was extremely comfortable and very favorable circumstances.
You dined well.
Oh yes, we had very, very well. We slept a lot and we worked a little, but on the whole it was a very nice holiday, and we all come back far more rested than when we left.
Zulu's class racing flag proclaims that battle is still on. Vernon Sainsbury at the helm is unaware, however, that in the same patch of ocean another sea drama is being played out. Below, a little yacht called Tinkerbell has stolen the headlines. The spirit that makes a man endure the harsh discomforts of the ocean are gloriously displayed by a quiet American called Bob Manry. Manry sailed 3,000 miles of Atlantic in a cockleshell boat 13 feet long. A hero's welcome awaits Manry when it's all over. The Fastnet weather is kind to him too this year. There's only 100 miles or so to Plymouth, and David Revel reminds us that ocean racing is not tough stuff all the way. They've been at sea for 5 days now. The shipping lanes are busy off the Cornish coast. Zulu's got her work cut out to battle with fickle winds and tricky tides. Contrary to rule, the wind is against them this time. Gear needs to be checked. No one stands still at sea when they're racing. This is David Blackburn, a regular Zulu crew member and a quantity surveyor in London.
I'm getting married next spring, and for the moment my sailing is going to have to be on other people's boats, mainly because of the financial angle. But as soon as we can afford it, I hope we have our small cruiser, and we shall teach our own children to sail, as I was taught from an early age, to have confidence in the sea and to enjoy sailing. I live at Leigh-on-Sea, within view of the Thames estuary, and each morning as I walk to the station I can see the boats at their moorings, and I wish I was going for a sail there. But I come up to London by train, and even in London I still have the idea of the sea in my mind as I walk through Billingsgate Market. When I was young, I couldn't afford a cruiser, the boat the size one could go away in for the weekend, so I bought a small boat, and I bought a small plywood racing dinghy, and I raced amongst my friends, and there was the element of competition which made it even more interesting. Racing got into my blood so much that I took it up seriously. Usually on Zulu we eat pretty well. We have a small refrigerator so we can carry the fresh meat. We sometimes carry a prefabricated meal. Vegetables we can carry, even if in dehydrated form. So we reckon to eat pretty well on board. With a young crew, unless they're allowed to eat pretty well, you'll find they won't come again, so it's a necessity.
Cram 8 men into a box 10 feet wide by 10 feet long, carry out all the normal chores of living, then tilt it back and forth at a crazy angle, and you have life on board Zulu. Add to it a dash of music on the radio, and the lively sense of fun of boisterous young crew. Medical students, surveyors, salesmen. And like others, they'll dash down to the Solent at weekends to join Zulu for the shorter channel races. A regular crew knows the drill of ocean racing, like Neil McLennan.
Well, I've been a medical student for the past 18 months. I've just finished the second MD course and started clinical, which means we actually work in the wards. I share a flat in Kensington with 4 other medical students. And life in the flat is really very similar to sailing on Zulu. You've all got to get along with each other, live in the same flat together, just 4 crowded rooms. My studies so far have been completely theoretical. They've been concerned with just the normal body. But now we get on to the pathologies of disease and the actual things that people complain of. In fact, what medicine means to the everyday person. 20 years ago, it was very difficult to learn to sail, other than having perhaps your own boat or knowing someone who owned a boat. But today, it's very easy to learn.
There's always a certain amount of celebration. It's part of the letdown, the anticlimax after the race. Many ocean racing people also play rugger, and as a result, the parties tend to be rather akin to a rugger club party afterwards.
Zulu's home, a creditable 85th place on corrected time. She sailed 605 miles in 4 days and 19 hours. The veteran Fastnet sailor Vernon Sainsbury sums it all up this way.
I've never yet known anyone that came back from a Fastnet and said, I've sailed a perfect race. They've always made mistakes and always will make mistakes because it is such a tremendously exacting both navigational and sail trimming race. But then I suppose I'm biased. I still think the Fastnet is the greatest ocean racing course in the world.